says the word firstborn signifies priority. In the culture of the Bible times, the firstborn was not necessarily the oldest child. Firstborn referred not to birth order primarily, but to rank. The firstborn possessed the inheritance and leadership or the blessing. You have this in numerous passages, by the way. Let me show you.
All things theology, we chop it up properly without an apology. Gotta get doxology to God, hallowed be, cause this is how we do it at All Things Theology.
If I say I am the firstborn of all my brethren, what does that mean? It means I came first.
Okay, I'm glad he said that. Because I'm going to show him a case where that's not the case. Matter of fact, there's firstborn is used multiple ways in the Bible, but he only allows for the sequential one. Fair enough. Give me a few clips and we will get to that. I told you we was going to get to this issue of firstborn, prototokos, and talk about it a little bit deeper, a little bit more. The issue of firstborn and what does it mean to be the firstborn son? What does it mean to be the firstborn of all creation, as Colossians talks about? Well, let's hear young Don.
Who has delivered us from the power of darkness and has translated us into the kingdom of his dear Son, in whom we have redemption through his blood, even the forgiveness of sins, who is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of every creature. Now think about that. He's the firstborn of every creature. What does this mean?
Well, it can't mean the literal first, because you're going to run into a problem even in Colossians. Let's look at it. It says he is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. So his view is Jesus is the first of all creation, right? The literal first. That's what it's talking about here. Keep reading though. For by him, all things were created. So I don't know how you can be how you can create everything if you are created, because then that would mean you created yourself. See, this is why the Jehovah's Witness have added right there all other things, because they're saying, well, yeah, he was created, but he created all other things. Well, that's not actually in the text. Allah's Greek word for other is not in the text. But anyway, let's keep going. In heaven and earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. And he is before all things. It's actually defining the firstborn category of what it means if you actually keep reading. And in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning. Listen to this. Remember the definition young Don provided for firstborn was literal first, right? He says, well, so verse 15 is saying he's the first creation, first created thing, right? Okay. Notice what it says in 15. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead. Let me ask you this question. Was Jesus the first person that ever rose from the dead? Was Jesus the literal first that was raised from the dead? If that's going to be your definition, because you're going to have, so if you say no, now you're using a different definition of firstborn than you just used literally 2 verses ago, but without reasoning. Obviously, Jesus was not the first person to raise from the dead. I mean, do we remember Lazarus, right? Lazarus raised from the dead prior to Christ, right? Matter of fact, there were many who resurrected on the day of Jesus Christ's crucifixion. You know, some Old Testament saints, I wouldn't go with that. But nevertheless, there was a resurrection. So if you're going to say Jesus was the literal first creation in verse 15, then you're going to have a contradiction in verse 18, where it says he's the beginning, the first from the dead. This is called a contradiction. Let me explain the doctrine of firstborn. I would believe firstborn speaks of the preeminence. He's speaking of their status. It says the word firstborn signifies priority. In the culture of the Bible times, the firstborn was not necessarily the oldest child. Firstborn referred not to birth order primarily, but to rank. The firstborn possessed the inheritance and leadership or the blessing. You have this in numerous passages, by the way. Let me show you. Let me show this. So Genesis 48:14, and Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on the head of Ephraim, right? Well, we know the hand being laid on by the father on the son was to signify a blessing, an inheritance. So he laid the hand on Ephraim, who was the younger child. Listen to this. In his left hand on the head of Manasseh, crossing his hands, right? For Manasseh was the firstborn. Now, this is speaking of a sequential order. So Ephraim is the younger child, right? This isn't debated, right? Ephraim, who was the younger? Well, look at this. Look at what Jeremiah 39 says. We've already established Ephraim was the younger child. And this is where atheists tried to pick up alleged Bible contradictions. But they actually, like young Don, don't understand the terminology of firstborn. Notice what Jeremiah says. With weeping they shall come, and with pleas for mercy I will lead. Right? I will lead them back, and I will make them walk by brooks of water, in a straight path in which they shall not stumble. For I am a father to Israel, and Ephraim is my firstborn. Wait a second. Genesis 48:14 just told us that Ephraim was the literal younger child. So how can Ephraim be the firstborn if Ephraim was the secondborn? That's because firstborn many times refer to preeminence. He was the one that received the blessing. And that's what is going on in Colossians. Jesus is not speaking of literal first created thing or first person that rose from the dead. He's above. He's preeminent above creation. So young Don does not understand firstborn terminology. And so this is why it actually leads him to major confusion. Well, if I had a son, wouldn't that make me the firstborn? Or if I was the first son, wouldn't that be the firstborn? Well, the Bible also refers to firstborn as preeminence, right? Priority. Yeah, I love the Bible. All that theology. Where is the people responding to that now? I mean, Jesus is above creation. He entered into creation, though he is God in the flesh. You know, I had a conversation. Me and a buddy had a conversation with some Jehovah's Witnesses a few years ago, and they were hitting with the firstborn, right? Hitting with the firstborn, right? And they gave us enough time, graciously. I would say they were a nice Jehovah's Witness, to elaborate on this firstborn. And when me and my friend got done, he had no response. And he was just like, well, I'll have to look at that. Which is fair. But he kept using the firstborn argument, even though we had demonstrated him. Firstborn does not always mean that. And quite clearly in Colossians 1 does not mean that. Otherwise, you're going to run into a contradiction from verse 15 to verse 18.
Everybody hates Chris.
Yo guys, thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed what you heard here today, why don't you go and leave me a like? Subscribe to the channel if it's your first time here. Hit that notification bell. I promise to give you weekly content, lives, interacting, exposing false teachers, showing you my theological beliefs and what I believe the Bible teaches. So if you're here for that, go and join us.